Imagine a power so profound, so immense, that it can transform your life, your mind, and your world. A power that is not found in wealth, titles, or predetermined destinies, but in something so close, so intimate, that it resides on your very lips. Welcome to The Kingdom on Your Lips, How to Rule Through Prayer, a journey guided by the wisdom of Emmet Fox, a journey where you will discover that prayer is not just words, but the key that opens the door to a realm of peace, strength, and inner transformation. Every word you speak can become an act of creation. Every thought directed with intention becomes a seed of change, capable of transforming conflict into clarity, doubt into certainty, and limitations into opportunity. In these spoken pages, you will learn to govern from the invisible, to build your world through conscious prayer, and to manifest a kingdom of harmony and purpose. Starting here, starting now, with the words that leave your lips. Get ready. Your journey into the silent, creative power of prayer is about to begin. What you discover here will forever change the way you speak, think, and live. Every true government begins in the soul. It is not the environment that determines your life, but the quality of your thought, the structure of your consciousness, the degree of spiritual authority you exercise over your mind. As long as man insists on changing the outer world without first governing the inner one, he will remain trapped in circles of confusion. But the day he understands that prayer is the legislative power of his soul, that day he will cease to be a subject of circumstances and will become their rightful ruler. To pray is not to beg. To pray is not to implore a distant God for mercy. To pray is not to repeat formulas in order to appease invisible forces. To pray is to decree. It is to establish truth with clarity. It is to assume that the divine principle, eternal and unchanging, lives within you and responds to the direction you give through your sustained thoughts and feelings. Prayer is the mental legislation of what must be manifested. That is, it is inner authority. The difference between a pleading prayer and an affirming prayer changes everything. The first comes from fear, the second comes from recognition. Pleading rests on lack. Affirmation rests on the good that already exists. He who pleads has not understood the principle. He who affirms executes it. A supreme example of this understanding is found in the Roman centurion of Matthew 8:8-10. When asking for the healing of his servant, he said to Jesus, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, and I have soldiers under my command." Jesus, upon hearing this, marveled, not because of the man's blind faith, but because of his understanding of the principle of authority. He knew that a spiritual order, given with clarity and without interference, would produce the desired result. That is the essence of governing prayer. In the pages that follow, you will learn how to use this power. You will see that truth is not a doctrine. It is a principle that always acts the same. You will understand the role of thought, mental structure, mental equivalence, and above all, you will learn to pray as it should be done, with spiritual authority, with inner order, and with conscious mastery of the good. For your world will not change when you display it, but when you govern it from prayer. Governing from prayer. Based on the teachings of Emmet Fox, we have noticed that more than 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and giving the video a like. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The world is mental and prayer governs it. The very first thing you must understand with absolute clarity and without the slightest hesitation is this. The world you experience is mental. It is not material, not physical, not external in the common sense that people believe. The world you inhabit, with its joys and sorrows, triumphs and tragedies, is nothing more than the precise projection of your own state of consciousness. It is mental. It always has been. It always will be. This is the most important teaching a human being can ever receive, and it is the foundation of all true spiritual science. Everything else is built upon this point. This law of mentalism is the master key to existence. It is the ultimate explanation of why things happen as they do. It is the very ground upon which rests the possibility of changing your life through thought and prayer. For if the world were material, if things were truly what they appear to be, then spiritual change would be impossible. But since the world is mental, and external things are nothing but the reflection of internal thought, then to change the mind is to change the world. Notice, we are not speaking of philosophy nor proposing some attractive but useless idea. We are affirming a law as concrete as the law of gravity. When you understand that everything in your life is an effect, and that the cause lies in your mind, then you will begin to live as what you truly are, a child of God, with power, with purpose, and with direction. To keep this truth from floating as an abstract declaration, let us break it down with precision. We begin at the very beginning, the first verse of the first book of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. This verse does not refer to the chronological beginning of time, as if it were describing the date when the universe started. No, in the beginning means in the creative beginning, which is the mind of God, pure spirit. Every creation begins in mind. Every birth first occurs as a mental conception. God, being spirit, does not create with hands or with tools. He creates by thought. That is why the Genesis account does not say God carved, sculpted, or manufactured. Instead it says, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." Genesis 1:3. The entire universe is thus the result of a series of divine mental affirmations. This is not poetic metaphor, it is an exact description of the spiritual dynamics of creation. What God did was to issue a series of decrees. Those decrees, spoken from the beginning, produced form, matter, time, and space. In the same way, you too create your world through your decrees. I do not mean only spoken words, though they have power, but sustained thought, charged with emotion, directed with intention. Every thought you accept as true descends into the subconscious and becomes a seed which sooner or later sprouts into experience. Your environment is no accident. It is solidified mental construction. Let me be even clearer. If you think sickness, you will experience sickness. If you think lack, you will see lack. If you hold fearful thoughts, you will live in a dangerous world. But if you pray correctly, that is, if you introduce into your mind thoughts of health, prosperity, protection, harmony, and sustain them with faith, then the outer world will begin to reflect this new mental state. I have seen people healed of chronic illness simply by changing their way of thinking. I have seen men rescue failing businesses through sustained affirmative prayer. I have known entire families reconciled after years of hatred, when one member began to pray with true understanding. I have even heard, and you too can find these testimonies, of wars halted by circles of fervent prayer, by entire towns that lifted their consciousness, as happened during World War II in certain enclaves of England. The facts exist, the law acts, but it is not enough to know this. You must live it. You must prove it in your own life. That is why we turn to a parable that Jesus taught, one which, if correctly understood, contains the very heart of this teaching. The parable of the sower recorded in Matthew 13. Behold, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, some fell on rocky ground, some fell among thorns, but some fell on good soil, and it brought forth fruit, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. This is not an agricultural story. It is a spiritual diagram. The sower is each of us. The seed is thought. The soil is the subconscious mind. The fruit is the visible result in life. When you think something repeatedly, with intention, with emotion, with certainty, you are sowing. If your thought is scattered, shallow, full of fear or contradiction, it is like the seed on the path that never penetrates. If your thought is emotional but unstable, without spiritual understanding, it is like seed on rocky ground. If you think rightly, but surround yourself with negative opinions, criticism, anxiety, or fear, it is like seed among thorns. It grows but bears no fruit. Only when the inner soil, the subconscious mind, has been prepared by the discipline of thought, by meditation, prayer, and affirmation, does the seed bear fruit and the outer experience change. This explains clearly why many prayers do not work. A person may say beautiful words, but their subconscious is saturated with doubt, resentment, or distrust. It is like trying to plant roses in dry and thorny soil. Desire alone is not enough. The soil must be cleared, the deep mind must be re-educated. If you understand what has been said so far, you already hold in your hands half of spiritual government. The other half is a constant application. It is not enough to know the world is mental. You must act as though it is. You must think with vigilance, you must pray with intention. You must affirm the good even when all seems dark. You must remember that the external world yields without exception to the power of the mind governed by prayer. Remember, you're not trying to change a world that is outside of you. You're changing your thoughts, and thus the world changes. All true reform begins in the mind. Reflection for the soul. Today, understand that you govern your world not by force, not by struggle, not by argument, but by thought. Sow rightly. Cultivate your consciousness. Stand firm in truth. Repeat within yourself, this is a mental world. I govern my world through conscious prayer. Every thought I accept as true manifests. I sow only truth. I reap only good. Do this with faith, with constancy, with joy, and the fruit will come. For as Scripture teaches, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Galatians 6:7. Chapter 2. Every effective prayer is a silent command. Every effective prayer is a silent command. It is not a plea, not a lament, not an act of resignation before higher forces. It is an act of spiritual authority. It is an inner decree issued from the consciousness that has recognized its unity with the creative principle. This is the key. When you truly pray, you are not trying to convince God to do you a favor. You are affirming from the soul an eternal truth that has always been available, but which you now decide to manifest. To pray is not to beg, to pray is to establish. Most people have never truly prayed. They have only begged, only implored, only emptied their fears, anxieties, and complaints in an emotional outpouring without direction or understanding. And then they have wondered why their prayers were not heard. They were not heard because they were not true prayers. They were expressions of fear, not affirmations of spirit. A prayer is effective when it is born of understanding, when it comes from the certainty that God is good, that you are His child, and that what you affirm in harmony with truth carries creative power. Prayer does not change God. Prayer changes your consciousness, and when your consciousness changes, the outer world, which, as we have seen, is mental, aligns with this new inner state. When Jesus said, "Thy will be done," Matthew 6:10, He was not passively surrendering His life to uncertainty. He was affirming that the will of God is good, and that this good must and can manifest in this world when someone affirms it with faith. The will of God is not sickness, poverty, or suffering. The will of God is life, fullness, harmony. To say, "Thy will be done," is to affirm the active presence of good here and now in this very situation. That is true prayer. Let us consider a biblical example that reveals with complete clarity the nature of true prayer. The case of Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus, found in John 11:41-43. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was laid, and Jesus lifted up His eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I knew that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when He had said these things, He cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." Observe carefully. Jesus does not beg, does not negotiate, does not plead for intervention. He gives thanks. Thanks before seeing the manifestation. That can only be done by one who knows that his prayer is a spiritual command, not an uncertain request. I thank you that you have heard me. This is an affirmation of consummated faith. Then he directs not his energy to heaven, but to the manifestation. Lazarus, come forth. It is an order, a decree, the command of a mind aligned with the principle. It is not hysteria, not spectacle. It is spiritual authority. This is the right attitude. This is the model. If you wish to pray effectively, do not implore, command. Do not beg, affirm. Do not weep, direct. And do it in silence. For prayer is not meant to impress anyone, not even yourself. Power manifests in serenity. Every effective prayer is silent, though it may sometimes be spoken aloud. The true power is in consciousness, not in volume. Now then, how is this kind of prayer carried out? How is it structured? This is where what I have often taught under the name metaphysical treatment comes in. Treatment is an exact mental operation. It is not a chain of beautiful words, not an empty formula. It is a sequence of directed thought with a defined purpose, to re-educate the subconscious and establish a new pattern of manifestation. Let me explain it carefully. The anatomy of a metaphysical treatment. Every effective treatment consists of three essential phases. To omit even one is like trying to build a house without foundations or to sow without plowing. These phases are: 1. Recognition. Here you affirm mentally the truth about God. You say inwardly, God is absolute good. God is infinite intelligence. God is love. God is omnipresent. God is here. God is all power. You do not repeat this like a parrot. You do it until you feel it. You do not move to the next phase until this truth has been ignited within you. This is the phase of alignment. Without it, you are praying in error. 2. Unification. Next, you affirm your unity with God. You say, I am one with God. I am the living expression of His intelligence. His power flows through me. The mind of Christ is in me. Nothing separates me from the good. This is the most neglected part of ordinary prayers. Many believe God is far away, that they must reach His attention. But God is not far. God is within you. Unification is essential. 3. Realization. Finally, you affirm the result. At this point, you are no longer trying to convince yourself. You already know. You say mentally or verbally as you feel, this situation is resolved. Harmony is manifest. Peace reigns here. The body is restored. Supply flows. The relationship is healed. All is well. You speak as one giving an order. You are not asking the universe for permission. You are decreeing from your position as a child of God. After the treatment, you keep silence. You do not speak of the problem. You do not mention it again. You do not go telling others to see what they think. You have prayed. You have sown. Now you must let the principle act. The seed germinates in secret. It is important to note this. Treatment is not magic. It is not manipulation. It is not about forcing things. It is not done to impose your will, but to align your consciousness with truth. That is why, if you carry out a treatment and do not see immediate results, do not assume it has failed. Ask yourself, was my faith genuine? Do I remain at peace? Am I expecting results with confidence or with anxiety? The treatment begins to work the moment it is issued, but every seed requires its time to mature. The key is to persist without tension. If you repeat the treatment, it is not because God did not hear you, but because your mind still needs to reinforce the idea. Effective prayer is not repetition, it is conviction. And when conviction becomes complete, manifestation is inevitable. Therefore, engrave this in your heart. Every effective prayer is a silent command. If you pray from the authority of the Christ within you, if you pray from the consciousness of unity with the principle, if you pray with certainty and not with fear, then the universe responds, not because you have changed God, but because you have aligned your mind with His will, which is pure good. To pray correctly is to govern, to take possession of your inner world, and from there to shape the outer world. As Scripture teaches, truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. Mark 11:23. This is not hyperbole, it is a spiritual law. Reflection for the soul. Pause and ask yourself sincerely, am I praying or am I begging? Am I affirming or am I pleading? Am I acting as a child of the Most High or as a beggar of His goodness? Decide today to change the way you pray. Do not say, God, do this for me. Instead declare, God in me is the only presence and the only power. I decree the good. I affirm the truth. I am one with the will of God, and that will is fulfilled now. Do it with serenity. Do it in silence. Do it as one who governs, and the world will respond. Chapter 3. How the inner Christ governs through you. The most widespread error in spiritual understanding, and therefore the most harmful, consists in believing that Christ was merely a historical person, confined to a time and a physical body called Jesus. This confusion has caused centuries of idolatry, fear, superstition, and external dependence. As long as people continue to seek outside themselves what they already possess within, they will remain enslaved by error. Christ is not a distant figure who lived in Palestine 20 centuries ago. Christ is an eternal, unchanging principle, present here and now in every human being, waiting to be recognized, affirmed, and manifested. Jesus was the highest incarnation of this principle. He was the purest, clearest, most perfect manifestation of Christ. But he was not the only one, and he will not be. Christ was not born in Bethlehem, nor did he die on Calvary. Christ moves beyond time, for he exists prior to time. As John teaches, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." John 1:1. That word, that pure expression of spirit, is what we call Christ, and it is in you, not partially, not as a dormant spark, but as the totality of God's presence, waiting for your consciousness to recognize it, activate it, and allow it to govern. That is why Isaiah, centuries before Jesus' birth, could prophesy, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders." Isaiah 9:6. This phrase does not refer to a chronological event, but to an inner process. Every time the soul recognizes Christ within itself, a spiritual child is born. That birth brings governance, for when Christ assumes the direction of your life, he does not govern by emotion, desire, or the world's opinion, but by truth. And truth never fails. This governance begins invisibly. It has no pomp, no spectacle. It produces no headlines, no agitated crowds, but it transforms. It transforms from the center. It changes the way you think, the way you speak, the way you make decisions. It changes your relationship with things, with people, with life itself. When Christ governs, internal conflicts cease because everything aligns under a single principle: good. You no longer choose according to fear, nor act by reaction. You see from above, speak from above, walk from above, because you know it is not you who acts, but Christ in you. So how is this governance activated? How does one transition from the human ego to the divine principle? The answer is through the conscious decision to think from truth. This is not mysticism, it is practice. Human will can choose either illusion or truth. It can think from the wounded personality or from the whole Christ. It can judge by appearances or by righteous judgment. To make decisions from truth means pausing before each situation and asking silently, "What does the Christ in me say about this?" Not "what do I want?" but "what is right according to the order of spirit?" This question transforms your consciousness. It introduces a new mental cause. From there, your thoughts, words, and actions become instruments of the kingdom. This governance is not abstract. It has tangible effects. Relationships harmonize, not through human effort, but through spiritual clarity. Work decisions are illuminated. Emotions are calmed. The body responds. Provision flows. Christ is not limited by reason. He operates according to spiritual law. When Christ governs, life organizes itself with superior precision. There is a parable that perfectly illustrates this process, the parable of the prodigal son, Luke 15:11-32. The story is familiar, but it is rarely understood as a map of the soul. A man has two sons. One asks for his inheritance, leaves and squanders it, ending in misery, wishing for food even the pigs do not receive. Then, the text says, he comes to himself, and here is the key moment. He decides to return home. The father receives him with open arms, restores him, gives him new clothes, a ring and shoes, and orders a feast. All of this is symbolic. You are that son. We all are. When we use our minds to think from ego, we stray from the kingdom. We waste our mental power on thoughts of fear, judgment, envy, or guilt. That is what it means to squander the inheritance. Life then becomes barren. But at some point, blessed be, we come to ourselves. We awaken. We realize we have been living apart from the principle and choose to return. That return is not geographical. It is mental. Returning to the Father is returning to right thought. It is remembering that we are one with the source. And when that happens, Christ within us, symbolized by the Father in the parable, does not punish us. He restores us, returns governance to us. The robe is new consciousness. The ring is spiritual power. The shoes are mastery of the path. The feast is the inner joy that arises when the mind aligns with God. This process occurs every time you pause and choose to think from Christ. Every time you choose truth over appearance, forgiveness over resentment, faith over doubt, you are returning home, and governance is established. Christ does not govern by force, he governs by principle. He does not impose. He manifests when recognized. Do not wait to be spiritually perfect to allow Christ to govern your life. Do not wait to feel worthy. Christ in you is already perfect. He only requires your permission. He only waits for you to make way. The human mind, conditioned, limited, fearful, will always seek reasons to maintain control. But if you desire true peace, true success, true freedom, you must relinquish control and surrender it to Christ. This does not mean renouncing your will. It means using your will to choose the principle. Prayer becomes the means by which you relinquish error and affirm truth. You no longer pray for things. You pray to allow Christ's governance. You no longer react with judgment. You respond with understanding. You no longer decide impulsively. You act from inspiration. Reflection for the soul. Pause now and affirm deep within yourself, the Christ in me is the only ruler of my mind, my emotions, my life. I am not separate from God. I am the living expression of the principle. Every decision I make, I surrender to the Christ in me. He governs with wisdom, love, and power, and I obey his way. Make this affirmation your daily practice. Repeat it in silence. Christ, govern in me. Do not say it with fear. Say it with authority. Say it as one who has come to himself. And you will experience, not in a single day but in every moment, that the kingdom of heaven is already within you, and that all governance truly rests upon his shoulders. Chapter 4. Decree and remain still, the art of result. Of all the qualities that lead to spiritual mastery, there is one that the soul must cultivate with care if it desires true results. Inner stillness. This is not physical inactivity or mental passivity, but a state of consciousness in which agitation gives way to certainty, where the mind ceases to move and the spirit speaks. This is the stillness that knows, affirms, and waits with authority. This is the secret contained in Psalm 46. 10. Be still and know that I am God. This command is not advice for emotional calm. It is an exact spiritual formula. It contains 3 precise instructions. Stop the movement of the mind. Penetrate the consciousness of unity with the principle. Recognize the presence of God as an active reality within you and in your situation. Whenever a person performs this operation, decreeing, silencing, and knowing, they are exercising divine authority in its highest form. And when this operation is carried out with understanding and faith, the result is inevitable. Many people pray and then ruin their prayer with useless words, anxiety, doubt, or nervous repetition. They have not understood that the spiritual decree is a sealed command which, once issued with conviction, does not need repetition but must be sustained in silence. The farmer who sows does not dig up the seed constantly to check its growth. He trusts the law. The seed acts invisibly. The soil does its work. Time fulfills its function. Likewise, prayer sows your decree, and then you remain still. This stillness is not passivity. It is governance. It is the authority of one who knows that their word will not return empty. It is the certainty of one who has prayed from the inner Christ and knows that the principle never fails. Therefore, after praying correctly, you must adopt a firm attitude, without hesitation, without repetition, without fear, without being swayed by appearances. This attitude is the art of result. Let us see how Jesus applied this art in one of the most powerful scenes of his ministry. The account is in Mark 4:37-39. But a great storm of wind arose, and waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling, and he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. This account is more than a story of a miracle. It is a living lesson on the power of decree and the value of subsequent silence. Jesus sleeps, not because he ignores the danger, but because he does not concede to it. He does not fear, he does not become agitated. When awakened, he does not panic or pray publicly. He issues a command, Peace, be still. This phrase is a decree, not a plea, not an emotional reaction. It is the assertion of power over appearance, followed by silence. There is no justification, no explanation, no discussion, only calm. This is the teaching. Issue the correct decree in spirit and then remain immobile. That mental stillness, that cessation of doubt, that suspension of human reasoning, that pause in the desire to control, is the fertile ground where the answer blossoms. This brings us to a vital practice, governing silence. It is a spiritual discipline that involves ceasing all unnecessary mental activity after a treatment. It means deciding not to speak of the problem, not to review the difficulty, not to allow images contrary to your decree. It means conserving your energy, closing the doors of the senses, and resting in presence. Governing silence is not avoidance, it is mastery. It is knowing that the essential has already been spoken, and now it is up to the principle to manifest. This silence is as powerful as the decree itself, sometimes even more because the decree sets the direction, but the silence allows it to be fulfilled without interference. If you speak of the problem, you recreate it. If you doubt, you reactivate it. If you seek human confirmation, you weaken your power. But if you remain silent, firm within, not swayed by appearances, God acts, and acts with precision. Let me share some real-life examples I have personally witnessed, where decree united with governing silence produced results the world would call miracles. A businessman in a financial crisis locked himself in his office, issued a single treatment affirming God's abundance as his immediate provision, and then remained completely silent. He spoke to no one, consulted no banks, sought no help. He said, "I have decreed. My mind has acted from Christ. Now I will remain silent." Within 48 hours, an unexpected transaction provided the necessary funds to resolve his situation. A woman whose daughter had gone missing during the war prayed once with total faith. God is with her. Divine love protects her. Truth guides her. She then remained inwardly immobile. She did not panic, did not search desperately. She simply kept her peace. 10 days later, her daughter returned safely from a bombed region. She later recounted being guided by an invisible force that avoided danger, trusted strangers who turned out to be allies and returned through the only safe route. Firm decree. Subsequent silence. A young man unjustly imprisoned applied this teaching in his cell. He did not plead. He did not despair. He affirmed, "God is my justice. Christ sets me free. No power stands against truth." Then he remained silent for days. He did not argue, defend himself, or curse. Within a week, forgotten evidence was found by his lawyer, and he was released. Human justice responded to spiritual decree united with silence. We could fill pages with similar testimonies, but it is unnecessary. What matters now is that you understand that silence is not inaction, it is authority in its purest form. The world taught you to speak, explain, justify, and repeat, but truth teaches you to decree and remain still. Reflection for the soul. After praying, remain silent. Speak not of the problem, do not mention it again. You have decreed. The principle acts in the secret of your soul. I have spoken from the Christ within me. The word has been sown. I remain immobile. Good manifests. Nothing disturbs my peace. Silence is my power. Practice this silence daily. After your treatment, look not back. Walk as one who has already received, for so it is. The law does not fail, and when you do not interfere, truth manifests without obstacle. Chapter 5. The subconscious mind. Perfect servant or unconscious tyrant. Everything you have experienced, every event, every relationship, every illness, every situation, whether good or bad, joyful or painful, has its origin in a mental cause. There is not a single occurrence in your life that has not been first sown within you. This fact is absolute, unavoidable, and for many, difficult to accept because it implies total responsibility. But, and this is the important part, it also implies total power. And that power resides in the mind, specifically in its deepest dimension, the subconscious. The human mind has two fundamental levels, the conscious and the subconscious. The conscious is the superficial, rational level that makes immediate decisions, observes, analyzes, debates, the level that thinks it thinks. The subconscious is the invisible realm where beliefs, habits, repeated emotions, memories, and above all, thought patterns are stored, patterns that determine how you react, how you decide, and how you perceive reality. It is there that the image of your life is impressed, and it is there that prayer exerts its true power. The subconscious does not reason, evaluate, critique, distinguish between what you desire and what you fear, or decide what to sow. Its task is to receive and shape. It is like fertile soil that does not choose the seeds. It produces fruit according to what is planted. That is why I have said many times, the subconscious is either a perfect servant or an unconscious tyrant, depending on how you govern it. If you plant correct thoughts, it becomes a channel for good. If you leave it to chance or fill it with fear, criticism, guilt, or resentment, it becomes the automatic reproducer of error. The conscious mind is the gardener, the subconscious is the soil, and prayer, when understood as the deliberate affirmation of truth, is the tool the gardener uses to sow. There is no other way to re-educate the subconscious than through the scientific repetition of correct thought. Every true affirmation repeated with faith and understanding dissolves an old pattern and establishes a new one. It is a process. It does not happen instantly, but it is infallible. The subconscious accepts impressions when they are repeated with firmness, emotion, and clear purpose. Imagine a simple scene, a well-defined garden with fertile soil. The garden owner does not tend it personally, but hires an obedient gardener. This gardener does exactly what is instructed. If told to plant roses, he plants roses. If given weed seeds, he plants weeds. He asks no questions, objects not, judges not. He simply executes. Over time, the garden produces exactly what was sown. This is your subconscious. This is the garden of your life. Now, what happens if every day you think of illness, lack, rejection, or failure? If you repeat phrases like, "Everything goes wrong for me," "Nobody values me," "I never have enough," you are sowing error unknowingly. You are delivering poisonous seeds to the gardener, and by law you will reap accordingly, not because God punishes, but because the mind obeys. It is law. The subconscious understands neither irony nor joke. It does not distinguish between a trivial expression and a solemn affirmation. It takes everything seriously and transforms it into experience. That is why the first step on the true spiritual path is to assume conscious governance of thought. You can no longer speak as before. You can no longer joke about your health, your money, or your relationships. You cannot allow your words to plant what your soul does not wish to harvest, because every word repeated with emotion is recorded, and if repeated enough, becomes a pattern. And the pattern eventually manifests as external reality. Here comes the most powerful and most misunderstood practice of all, the scientific repetition of affirmations. This practice is not about mechanically repeating words, like reciting a shopping list. No. Effective repetition is a deliberate, conscious, directed act. It is the intentional sowing of a spiritual idea into the subconscious. For the seed to germinate, it must meet three conditions: clarity, emotion, and persistence. Clarity. The affirmation must be precise. It must contain no negations or ambiguity. Do not say, "I am not sick," because the subconscious does not process the "not." It will hear "sick." Instead say, "God's perfect health manifests in me now." This affirmation is clear, constructive, and specific. Emotion. It is not enough to speak the words, you must feel them. If you repeat mechanically, without enthusiasm, without faith, without emotional connection, the subconscious does not accept it strongly. But if you say it with conviction, visualize it and feel it as true, the impression is deep. Persistence. This is where most fail. They do a treatment, repeat an affirmation for a few days, and if results do not appear immediately, they give up. The subconscious requires saturation. It needs time. Just as a seed does not sprout instantly, neither does an affirmation. But if you persist and do not contradict it with contrary thoughts, the result will come, because the law does not fail. So what is the role of prayer in all this? Prayer is the vehicle through which correct thoughts are introduced into the subconscious. It is the communication channel between your conscious mind, which decides what to sow, and your subconscious, which shapes what it receives. Therefore, every metaphysical treatment is an act of sowing, and every external result is the corresponding harvest. If you pray affirming truth and then live as if that truth is already manifested, you are reprogramming your subconscious. You are creating a new mental structure. You are opening the way to a new life. But if you pray and then speak from fear, resentment, or doubt, you are sowing two opposing seeds, and the result will be confusion, delay, and conflict. As James teaches, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. James 1:8. Divided faith produces no fruit, but persistent faith, even if small, transforms your entire existence. Here is where you decide whether your subconscious will be a perfect servant or an unconscious tyrant. If you govern it, educate it, and nourish it with true thoughts, it will become a channel for unlimited good. But if you leave it to govern itself, it will fill with outside impressions, worldly suggestions, images of fear, and you will end up living a life you did not choose, but one you allowed through mental neglect. You are responsible for what enters your mind. You cannot prevent the world from sending signals, but you can decide what to accept and what to reject. You can filter, choose, and affirm what is true, even if everything around you says otherwise. And if you do this with faith, the subconscious will obey. Reflection for the soul. Choose today to be the conscious gardener of your mind. Observe every word you speak, every idea you repeat, every emotion you harbor. Repeat inwardly, "My subconscious mind is my servant. I educate it with truth." Every affirmation of good I repeat is impressed within me and manifests with order and power. Nothing external has power over me. I decree truth, and my subconscious fulfills it faithfully. Make this affirmation your daily practice. Reprogram your life from within, because the world only changes when you change the seed, and the seed is in thought. Chapter 6. Governing Circumstances. Prayer as Causal Power. One of the most deeply rooted illusions in the human mind is the belief that things happen to us. This phrase, so common and seemingly innocent, is actually a spiritual poison because it declares, even if unconsciously, that we are victims, that there is something out there, a force, fate, or chance, determining our lives without our consent. It is a denial of the law. It is the forgetting that God is principle, and that principle manifests only through the mind. Nothing happens to you. Everything that occurs in your experience is the manifestation of prior mental causes. Every visible circumstance is an effect, and if it is an effect, it must have a cause. That cause resides in the mind, not the mind of God, which thinks only in terms of good, but in your own mind, which, depending on how it aligns or misaligns with truth, produces either harmony or disorder. This is the foundation of all practical metaphysics. The life you see is the mirror of the thoughts you sustain. Now, most of the thoughts that produce circumstances are not conscious. People do not say, "Today I will think of scarcity to create debt." Yet they do it, unconsciously. They do it when they repeat negative phrases, cultivate fear, believe in evil, or surrender to doubt. All these thoughts, though they seem small, are seeds, and every seed will bear fruit sooner or later. That is why the external world is nothing more than the field sown by the mind. At this point, the question becomes inevitable, and you must ask it with courage. What mental causes have you sown lately? What have you repeated mentally about your health, your family, your work, your inner life? Have you affirmed good? Have you trusted in truth even when appearances seem to contradict it? Or have you passively accepted the discourse of fear, failure, and discouragement? Your current life at this very moment is the result of those sowings. But the good news is that you can sow again. You can always begin a new sowing. You can always exercise your causal power through true prayer. And here, prayer reveals itself as the highest tool you possess. For properly understood, prayer is not begging for help from below. It is establishing cause from above. Prayer is not reaction. It is creation. It is not a request. It is proclamation. It is not defense. It is dominion. When you pray, you introduce a new cause into the field of your mind. That cause, if aligned with the Christ within, is more powerful than any previous cause because it acts from a higher plane. Prayer is therefore the act by which the soul introduces into its subconscious a new law, a new structure, a new pattern of thought, which, by the law of correspondence, must manifest. Prayer does not modify the past, it transcends it and establishes the future from a higher vibration. To illustrate this causal power, let us return to an extraordinary biblical story, Joseph in Egypt. His account, contained in Genesis chapters 37 to 50, should not be read as a mere historical narrative, but as a symbolic map of the soul learning to govern circumstances through fidelity to principle. Joseph is Jacob's favorite son, symbolizing a mind illuminated by truth. His brothers envy him, sell him, and consider him dead. He is thrown into a pit, the deep subconscious, then sold as a slave, a seeming loss of freedom, and later unjustly imprisoned. Each stage represents adverse situations that, at first glance, appear to come from outside. But Joseph keeps his consciousness aligned. He never curses, never rebels, never abandons his inner vision. Then the ascent begins. His interpretation of dreams, symbol of mastery over the unconscious, leads him before Pharaoh, and there, in an unexpected turn, he becomes governor of Egypt. Not for vengeance, not for ambition, but through his faithfulness to spirit. Joseph did not create negative circumstances, but through his mental attitude and silent faith, he caused the transmutation of those circumstances. He did not control the external, but he governed his consciousness, and that consciousness transformed the world around him. This story teaches a law. You cannot control events that others cause, but you can govern your response, and that response creates a new cause. Joseph is exalted because he remains in constant inner prayer. His prayer is not merely verbal, it is an attitude, a state of fidelity to truth. That fidelity establishes a higher cause that reorganizes his entire outer life. In the same way, you may find yourself in the midst of difficulty, injustice, or loss. But if you mentally affirm, I do not accept this appearance as final. I affirm good. I now establish the spiritual cause that dissolves this effect. Then you are praying as a ruler. You are taking possession of your world. You are exercising dominion. The world may tell you that you have no control, that you are a victim of circumstance, time, the body, history. But you know this is not true. You know your life is your mind projected, and that you can pray, and in praying, change the seed, and by changing the seed, change the harvest. And by changing the harvest, change the entire story. This is the teaching every child of God must remember. You are not here to adapt to circumstances, but to create them. Not to accept the inheritance of the past, but to establish a new spiritual order. Not to suffer the effects of fear, but to decree truth. And prayer is your tool. There is no other. It is the one Jesus used, the prophets used, Joseph in his prison used, and it is the one you can use right now. So again, the question, what mental causes are you sowing today? Because your tomorrow depends on it. If you pray from fear, urgency, or doubt, that prayer has no causal power, it is only reaction. But if you pray from understanding, from the Christ, from the certainty that good already is, then you introduce into your mind a seed of dominion, and that seed will inevitably bear fruit, because the law never sleeps. Reflection for the soul. Affirm now with full awareness, I am not a victim of circumstances. I am a mental cause. The prayer I issue from my Christ within has creative power. I now sow thoughts of good, peace, and abundance. I govern my world from silence and truth. Nothing external has authority over me. I am a spiritual cause, and my life manifests divine order. Repeat this affirmation every morning. Sow with faith, pray as one who governs, and you will see that things do not happen to you. Things respond to your consciousness. Chapter 7. From the storm to calm, the secret of inner mastery. There are moments in life when everything seems to lose its shape. The structures that gave us security wobble, the body weakens, relationships strain, money becomes scarce, and the soul feels thrown into an uncertain sea. In those moments, the untrained mind reacts with fear, and fear, as we have said, cuts off the flow of spirit. It is precisely there that the teaching of the Christ must take root, because no one can prevent storms from rising in the external world, but everyone can learn to master them from within. This is the secret of true spiritual power. In the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 8, verses 23 to 27, there is a scene that is not only historical but symbolic, psychological, and universal. And when he entered the boat, his disciples followed him, and suddenly there was a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was covered by the waves. But he was sleeping. And they came to him and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we are perishing. And he said to them, Why are you afraid, O you of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. This passage is one of the deepest treatises on the human mind in crisis. The boat symbolizes individual life. The sea represents the emotional world. The winds are agitated thoughts. The waves are adverse circumstances that seem to overwhelm us. The disciples represent the scattered aspects of our consciousness, limited perception, human fear. And Jesus sleeping is the Christ within, present but not yet activated. The problem is not the storm. The problem is fear. The storm has power only as long as consciousness remains divided. But once the Christ is awakened, once spiritual authority is affirmed, once the mind recognizes its unity with God, the storm obeys. External circumstances are not autonomous. They respond to inner governance. The boat does not sink when the Christ rules. It sinks when fear takes the helm. Jesus does not plead, does not negotiate with the sea, does not despair. He rebukes the wind, meaning he commands the invisible cause of agitation and says, "Be still, be silent." This is the decree, the precise expression of mastery. Prayer here is not a fearful request. It is an act of conscious power. That power arises from inner silence, from the certainty that God is not outside but within, that the Christ is not distant but sleeping deep within your soul, waiting for you to awaken it through faith. Now, what prevents this power from manifesting in you? Fear. Fear is the greatest enemy of effective prayer. Fear is misdirected faith. It is believing that evil has power. It is giving reality to illusion. It is accepting as final what is only temporary. Whenever you pray in fear, you are not praying from the Christ, but from the ego. You are not decreeing, you are pleading. You are not activating the principle, you are contradicting it. Therefore, if you wish to pray with results, you must first replace fear with spiritual authority. This is not achieved by struggling against fear, but by affirming truth. If you are in the midst of a crisis, do not say, "I am afraid, but I will pray anyway." Stop. Breathe. Affirm, "The Christ in me governs now." Repeat, "God is my protection. God is my health. God is my provision." Continue repeating until fear yields, for a divided mind cannot pray with power. I now propose a simple yet transformative exercise, mental reconstruction of the adverse scenario with affirmations. It consists of the following. Take a current situation that seems like a storm in your life, an illness, a debt, a broken relationship, or an external threat. Sit in silence. Close your eyes. Visualize the scene as you perceive it. Observe the boat, the sea, the waves. Then visualize the Christ within you awakening. See how it says, "Be still, be silent." Now, with your inner voice, repeat affirmations of mastery. In this situation, God governs. Nothing can separate me from good. This storm is appearance. Truth remains. The peace of Christ calms all agitation. I do not fear. I decree, I govern. Do this daily. Do it with faith. Do it as one who establishes rather than waits. And you will see in the invisible the storm begin to subside, not through evasion, but through presence. For where the Christ is affirmed, no chaos can endure. You might say, this is easy to say in theory, but in practice, when one is at war, in illness, or in loss, everything collapses. I tell you, precisely there is where you must apply this teaching. There are living testimonies of people who, amid extreme conditions, have achieved perfect peace through prayer. I remember a woman who lost her son in battle. All around her was mourning and despair, yet she, instead of sinking, entered into prayer. She did not seek explanations, did not let herself be swept away by grief. She sat each morning affirming, "God does not lose children. Divine love sustains my soul. My son lives in presence." Weeks later, a higher peace descended upon her. It was not resignation, it was comprehension. It was not human comfort, it was spiritual certainty, or the terminally ill patient who, upon receiving the diagnosis, ceased to struggle, not to surrender, but to govern. He began praying, affirming life, not from the body, but from principle. He repeated, "The life of God flows in me. I am health, not by condition, but by nature." His body, no longer infused with fear, began to respond. Not merely the medicine, but the reprogrammed mind, the activated Christ, or the prisoner unjustly accused who sought neither vengeance nor defense, turning inward instead. He said, "Truth liberates me. God is my judge." He prayed each day, not to leave the prison, but to leave the mental error. Months later, he was freed by unexpected means. The forgotten case, evidence discovered, the sentence annulled. Miracle? No. Spiritual law in action. All this occurs not because the storms cease magically, but because the mind stops fearing them, because the soul awakens to the Christ, because consciousness takes the helm, because prayer becomes governance and governance becomes peace. Reflection for the soul. Affirm now with full decision, "Though the waves rise, I remain in the Christ. I do not fear. I decree. The Christ in me calms every storm. In this situation, there is peace. In this body, there is life." In this relationship there is forgiveness. At this moment God governs. Make this affirmation your shield. Do not flee the storm. Walk upon it. For the Christ who sleeps in your boat has already conquered the sea. He only waits for you to awaken him. Chapter 8. The 4 levels of governing prayer. To govern through prayer is not an emotional act, nor a momentary burst of faith, nor a hope disguised as piety. To govern through prayer is a spiritual science, with internal laws that operate with the precision of physics and the power of fire. It is not enough to pray as you feel, nor to recite words that sound good. One must understand that every effective prayer, every prayer that truly transforms the mind and therefore the world, follows a progressive order. This order is not arbitrary. It is structural, universal, spiritual. There are 4 levels in governing prayer, 4 necessary stages, 4 steps that elevate the soul from confusion to spiritual authority. These levels are not necessarily traversed with different words, but with differentiated states of consciousness. Whoever learns to pray following this structure not only accesses power, but learns to construct power consciously. Because to pray correctly is not to cry for help, but to assemble a decree as one builds a temple, stone by stone, level by level. These are the 4 levels: recognition, unification, realization, and action. Level 1, recognition. Every effective prayer begins with a single act of consciousness, recognition. Recognize that God exists, not as theory, not as tradition, not as inheritance, but as present, active reality. This level consists of establishing with a clear mind and a steady heart that God is the only cause, the only power, the only presence, the only intelligence. There is no other authority, no other principle, no other origin. At this stage, the problem is not mentioned. Nothing is attempted to be resolved. The body, the debt, the conflict are not named, because the soul, when beginning the treatment, must rise above appearance. And this can only be done by recognizing that God already is, that good is already present, that truth already governs. This recognition is not a spiritual courtesy. It is the foundation of everything. For if there are still 2 powers in your mind, good and evil, your prayer will be weak. But if you affirm with conviction that only good is real, governance begins. Affirm, for example, God is infinite good, God is absolute love, God is perfect intelligence, God is here, God is now. Level 2, unification. Once the presence of God is recognized, the mind must take the next step, unify with it. Here occurs the most powerful inner turn, moving from contemplating God as something external to beginning to feel God as what you are. This is true Christian prayer. I and the Father are one. John 10:30. This phase consists of proclaiming with full consciousness that the presence recognized in the first level is not distant, but within you. It is your essence, your center, your true identity. This unification is not achieved through emotional exaltation or an act of will, but by internal recognition of your divine origin. Here you are not a servant speaking to your Lord. You are the Son recognizing himself in the Father. It is the Christ within you that prays, not the human ego. Affirm, for example, that life of God is my life now, that mind of God is the mind with which I think, that love of God is the one that acts in me. I am not separate. I am not outside. I am an expression of truth. This level unifies, erases separation, establishes the channel. Authority is born here. Level 3, realization. If the previous 2 levels have been fulfilled correctly, the mind is no longer divided, separate, or fearful. Then it can realize. This is the point where the decree is issued. Here, you affirm clearly what you wish to see manifested, not as desire, not as a request, but as a fulfilled spiritual fact. This is the most active moment of governing prayer. Here, the exact image to be materialized is introduced into the subconscious. But take care. One does not decree from need. One decrees from truth already recognized and assumed. Health is affirmed, not because it is desired, but because it already exists. Peace is affirmed not because it is longed for, but because it is the nature of being. One does not say, I hope this changes. One says, this has already changed on the spiritual plane, and therefore manifests now. Examples. The peace of God reigns now in this situation. Divine intelligence guides this decision and has already acted. The abundance of God flows without limits. In this case, divine order is established in my body right now. This is the creative act. Here prayer becomes cause. Here the seed is sown. Level 4, action. The final level is not physical, though it may manifest physically. It is the attitude after prayer. Once you have recognized, unified, and decreed, comes the final act, to act as one who has already received. This does not necessarily involve material action, but adopting a mental posture coherent with what you have affirmed. You do not speak of the problem again. Do not plant doubt. Do not seek signs. Do not review the how. You simply live from certainty. You walk as one who has already received. You make decisions in peace. You avoid double-mindedness. You remain in governing silence. This level is proof that your prayer was true. If you leave your treatment and speak again of the problem, you have not prayed. You have only spoken. This level sustains and manifests the decree. These 4 levels can be applied in minutes or hours. It is not a matter of time, but of consciousness. A 5-minute treatment that includes these 4 levels clearly can have more power than hours of unstructured recitation. What matters is understanding the progression: presence, union, decree, action. This is the architecture of effective prayer. Consider the parable of the Good Shepherd in John 10. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. John 10, 1-27. The Good Shepherd is the Christ within, guiding prayer at each phase. The sheep are thoughts, emotions, and scattered ideas that must be governed. The voice is the decree. The life the shepherd gives is the act of affirmation that transforms the mind. Following is the coherent action after prayer. This parable, rightly understood, shows how the soul must shepherd its inner world. Call thoughts by name, guide them toward good, protect them from fear, speak with authority, and live accordingly. Prayer is shepherding. Practical model of treatment following the 4 levels. Recognition. God is absolute good. God is life, truth, love. God is the only cause and presence. There is no power outside God. Unification. That life of God is my life. I am one with the principle, the Christ in me now. There is no separation. Realization. Divine order manifests in this situation. All conflict dissolves. Peace reigns. The solution is already underway. Action. I give thanks because it is so. I have no fear, no regression. I walk as one who has received. Practice this treatment daily, adapted to your situation, but follow the structure. Do not improvise from emotion. Pray as one who knows, as one who governs, as one who does not ask, but establishes. Reflection for the soul. Affirm now with full consciousness. My prayer has structure. My consciousness follows divine order. I recognize God. I am one with the Christ. I decree from truth. I act in peace. Nothing external has power. My mind governs because it prays with clarity. And pray this way, and your prayer will move mountains, not through emotional intensity, but through spiritual precision. Chapter 9. Cases of real spiritual governance. There is no argument more powerful than that of facts, and while truth does not depend on external proof to be true, concrete examples serve as a bridge connecting theory to lived experience. Some accept the spiritual law by intuition, while others need to see its action to believe. Both are granted evidence, not as a spectacle, but as confirmation of a law that has never failed. This law says, sustained thought impregnated with feeling and affirmed with knowledge governs external experience, and the most powerful tool to execute this law is scientific prayer. Throughout my life, I have known countless cases of ordinary people who, without visible resources, without external influence, without titles or doctrines, have completely transformed their lives through a single spiritual treatment, not by chance, not by luck, not by external intervention, but by implanting a new mental image, a mental equivalent aligned with truth. There is no external transformation without prior mental transformation, and no mental transformation without a firm decree replacing the old pattern. The mental equivalent is the invisible mold, the idea, the feeling, the blueprint that determines what physical experience must reflect. If your mental equivalent is illness, fear, or lack, that is what you will see, even if you verbalize it for years. But if you introduce a new equivalent, health, peace, freedom, abundance, and do so persistently, clearly, and vibrantly, life will respond with mathematical precision. This is not magic, it is law. Let me tell you a real story of a woman we will call Clara. She had spent over 20 years in an abusive marriage. not so much physically, but mentally oppressive. Her husband was cold, controlling, resistant to any spiritual growth. She, on the other hand, longed to study, pray, and develop, but every attempt was suppressed. For years she prayed, or rather begged, for change, but did so from fear, from a desire to escape, from supplication. Nothing changed. One day, she attended one of our meetings in New York and heard a simple but radical teaching. Do not pray from what you fear. Pray from what you choose to manifest. That night she returned home and made no more petitions. She sat in silence and for the first time built a mental equivalent of freedom. She did not imagine the form that freedom would take. She did not plan how the situation would resolve. She simply visualized herself walking through the city with steady steps, living alone, reading, writing, serving, laughing. She affirmed, "God created me free. Freedom is in me. I am an expression of full life. My soul expands, truth manifests." She performed this treatment every day, without speaking of the problem, without fighting, without asking, simply decreeing. 2 months later, her husband was transferred to another city by his company. She calmly told him she would not accompany him. Surprised by her firmness, he did not argue. They agreed to a separation on good terms. She rented a small apartment, began working in a library, and within a year was leading a spiritual study circle. Her health improved, her relationships flourished, and her peace was so palpable that others came to ask her secret. She replied, "Everything changed when I stopped asking and began governing with my prayer." Another case is that of a young shopkeeper whose store was on the verge of bankruptcy. Debts, unfair competition, demoralized employees. He asked for help. I asked, "What is your mental equivalent?" He fell silent. He did not understand. I explained, "What image does your mind hold every day? What vision do you have for your business? What phrase do you repeat internally?" He confessed that every morning he thought, "I don't know if we will make it today." That was his daily prayer. I asked him to change it to a new phrase. "Divine intelligence directs this business. Every client who enters is sent by God. There is order, prosperity, and efficiency." He repeated it morning and evening. He visualized the store full, employees smiling, an orderly environment. Within 6 weeks, income began to increase. A new wholesale client appeared. A legal problem resolved unexpectedly. Most importantly, his demeanor changed. He had authority, he had direction. But not all changes are external. The deepest change is the one that occurs in the person who prays. Many discover, upon beginning to pray with this structure, that what they were asking for is no longer necessary, or that what they longed for was only a temporary form of something deeper. The prayer changes them, and that inner change brings new circumstances, yes. But above all, it brings a new identity. A woman praying for an absent child discovered, after weeks of treatment, that what she truly sought was forgiveness for herself. When she freed herself from guilt, the child returned. A man praying for wealth discovered that what he desired was not money, but inner security. Once he found it, his business flourished. True prayer always leads you first inward, then outward. You cannot govern the world if you do not govern your mind, and you cannot govern your mind if you do not know your spiritual identity. So how does one implant a mental equivalent? Here is the step-by-step method. Choose the state you wish to manifest. Focus on quality, not form. Do not ask for a job at a specific company. Ask for meaningful, well-compensated activity. Do not ask for a person to change. Ask for harmonious relationships based on love and respect. Build an emotional image. If you desire peace, visualize yourself walking silently, breathing deeply, smiling. If you desire freedom, feel yourself moving without pressure, deciding without fear. Declare coherent affirmations. Use phrases like, "I am perfect health." Divine love harmonizes this relationship. God's wisdom guides every step I take. Abundance flows without limits in my life. Repeat with rhythm. Leave no room for contrary thought. When doubt arises, repeat the affirmation. Repetition imprints. Constant imprinting transforms. Live as one who has already received. This step is crucial. Do not act as if you are waiting. Act as one who establishes. This is the secret. Prayer is not magic, it is governance. And all governance requires vision, structure, and persistence. Every case of real transformation I have seen was not a mystical miracle, but the natural result of consistently applying spiritual law. Because the law is infallible. The only variable is your fidelity to it. Reflection for the soul. Affirm now with authority, I am a spiritual cause. I decree from truth. Every word I affirm becomes an image. Every image becomes experience. I implant only what I wish to harvest. My prayer transforms my world because it first transforms me. I am one with the principle. I am governance. Meditate on these words not for their sound but for their truth, because if you change your mental equivalent, everything else will follow naturally. Chapter 10. Affirmations of Authority. How to pray with power. There is no effective prayer without affirmation, and there is no true affirmation without spiritual authority. One who prays without authority does not pray, they only speak. One who affirms without conviction does not affirm, they only recite. And one who expects results without establishing a clear decree has not yet understood that the kingdom of God is conquered through governing thought, not through fluctuating emotion. Jesus did not pray asking permission, nor did he recite endless liturgies, nor repeat empty formulas. He decreed, and that decree, issued from the consciousness of the Christ within, had the power to instantly reorder the mental substance of the universe. He healed, multiplied, calmed, and liberated, all through the word, but not just any word. A word charged with spiritual authority, a word issued from the principle, a word in unity with the divine plan. That is why he taught in Matthew 18:18, "Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." This verse is one of the most powerful keys in Christian metaphysics because it reveals the causal structure of the universe. What is decreed in the mental plane, earth, is fixed in the spiritual plane, heaven, and from there descends as visible form. It is not the other way around. Heaven does not impose conditions. The human mind establishes them, and the principle, which never violates free will, simply reproduces what it receives. You affirm peace, and it is established. You affirm fear, and it densifies. You affirm health, and the body responds. You affirm scarcity, and the economy contracts. Every decree is an order the universe obeys without judgment. Here lies immense power, but also the responsibility of prayer. Prayer is not talking to God as if he were a distant person. It is using the word as an instrument of mental governance. It is to define, declare, seal. It is to speak as though it is already done in the higher plane, and now must manifest according to the decree issued. Not every affirmation is an affirmation of authority. Some repeat positive phrases, but from doubt, need, or the desire to convince themselves. This may have some effect, like planting a weak seed in fertile soil. But an affirmation of authority does not seek to convince. It knows. It does not doubt. It establishes. It does not desire. It proclaims. How do you distinguish a simple affirmation from an affirmation of authority? Origin. A common affirmation arises from the intellect. An affirmation of authority comes from the Christ within, in union with the principle. Tone. A common affirmation sounds like desire. An affirmation of authority sounds like a decree. Energy. A common affirmation requires constant repetition to gain strength. An affirmation of authority can produce instant change because it is charged with faith, not insistence. Result. A common affirmation has a gradual effect. An affirmation of authority can have immediate effect, though it always acts according to perfect order. Building an affirmation of authority requires knowledge, purity of intention, and spiritual alignment. It is not about magic formulas, but about clearly establishing what the soul knows is true. The basic structure is simple. Name the divine quality and establish its presence here and now. Let's see how this applies in different areas. Health. Do not say, "I hope to heal," or "God will heal me." That expresses doubt or future projection. Instead say, "The life of God flows through every cell of my body. I am perfect health now. My body responds to the divine mind. Every organ acts with wisdom and order." Do not consult symptoms or diagnosis. Speak as a higher decree. Finances. Do not say, "I hope money comes," or "I hope to find work." Affirm, "God's abundance manifests in all my activities. Every need is supplied now. Divine order governs my economy. No good is withheld from me." Do not beg. Establish the law of supply, which is spiritual and permanent. Relationships. Do not say, "I want this person to change." That is manipulation. Affirm, "Divine love harmonizes this relationship.
Only truth remains. I relate from the Christ within me. All false bonds dissolve, all true bonds strengthen. Purpose, do not say, I don't know what to do with my life. Affirm, divine intelligence directs my steps. I fulfill my purpose with joy. My life has direction. I hear inner guidance and act in peace. These affirmations clarify the path because they align the mind with the divine plan. Golden rule. Every affirmation of authority must be formulated in the present, in positive terms, in simple and direct language. Do not mention the problem. Affirm the truth. Do not justify the request. Proclaim the law. Another key, the internal tone. The external voice matters less than the inner vibration with which the words are spoken. Many repeat a powerful phrase mechanically without results because internally they doubt. But one who affirms with even a minimum of true faith even once can see instant change. The universe does not respond to the number of words, but to the level of consciousness with which they are issued. Consider this scene. Jesus approaches Lazarus's tomb, and instead of crying or begging, he raises his voice and says, "Lazarus, come forth." John 11:43. This is a perfect example of an affirmatively selecting informational stimuli, dedicating minimal time to external news, and prioritizing contact with success stories, prosperity books, and abundance testimonies. The mind, like the body, is nourished by what it consumes. By choosing prosperous stimuli, one strengthens a wealth-conscious mind and closes the door to doubt and fear. The importance of surrounding oneself with prosperous stimuli cannot be overstated. Florence suggested creating environments that inspire wealth, images of abundance, affirmative phrases, cheerful music, vibrant colors, and, above all, the company of optimistic, generous, and successful people. The vibration of those around us directly influences our mental field. Seek the company of those who celebrate success. Give thanks for blessings and expect the best from the universe. This is a vibrational investment that multiplies the fruits of spiritual practice. The daily practice of gratitude is the cornerstone of prosperous maintenance. Florence taught giving anticipatory thanks every morning for both visible and invisible abundance, for what has been received and for what is on the way. Gratitude practiced as discipline transforms a reactive mind into a creative mind. Those who give thanks retain and multiply. Those who forget to give thanks stagnate the flow of blessings. At least 3 times a day, upon waking, at midday, and before sleeping, the practitioner, mentally or in writing, details all the ways abundance manifests in their life, including the smallest and most subtle forms. Conscious blessing of every income and expense is another fundamental exercise. Upon receiving money, goods, or favors, take a moment to declare, "I bless this abundance," and give thanks for its multiplication in my life and in the lives of all involved. When spending or investing, repeat, "I bless this money and release it so that it returns multiplied." This practice is not mere rhetoric. It reprograms the mind to associate all energy circulation with growth and return, dissolving the old fear of loss and scarcity. Mental protection, according to Florence, is the active defense against relapsing into a poverty consciousness. Each time a thought of fear, doubt, unworthiness, or resignation arises, the practitioner identifies it, recognizes it as foreign to their new identity, and consciously replaces it with a prosperity affirmation. For example, when the thought, "I cannot afford this," appears, respond immediately, "I am always supported by the infinite abundance of the universe." Mental vigilance, far from being constant tension, becomes second nature, a reflective attitude that detects and corrects deviations before they consolidate. Florence taught that preventing relapses requires recognizing early signs of returning to the old mindset: excessive fear of the future, guilt for receiving, difficulty spending or investing, envy of others' success, tendency to complain, or feelings of stagnation. At the appearance of any of these symptoms, the practitioner should intensify gratitude, visualization, affirmation, and blessing practices, reinforcing neural circuits of abundance before old patterns re-establish themselves. Mental renewal is a continuous process. Florence recommended varying affirmations, renewing mental abundance maps, incorporating new images, writing periodic letters to money, and constantly aligning financial goals with spiritual purpose. Stagnation signals an empty routine. Creativity in spiritual practice keeps enthusiasm alive and maintains the expectation of new manifestations. The ultimate goal is the transformation of abundance into a permanent state, living wealth not as an occasional event, but as a natural, irreversible condition of personal identity. To achieve this, Florence suggested creating virtuous cycles of prosperity, giving to receive, investing to grow, teaching to learn, celebrating others' success to magnetize one's own. By turning every act of prosperity into a seed for more abundance in one's life and the lives of others, the practitioner establishes wealth as law, not exception. Creating a legacy of vibrational wealth is the ultimate result of this discipline. Florence taught that well-sustained prosperity not only transforms the individual's life, but also that of their family, surroundings, and descendants. Mental and emotional patterns of abundance can be transmitted just as scarcity patterns are, creating future generations with a healthy, natural relationship with wealth. The teaching, example, and daily presence of the practitioner become a beacon for those around them, consolidating the expansive cycle of prosperous consciousness. In conclusion, maintaining abundance is an art requiring attention, rigor, and creativity. Protecting the mind from scarcity contamination, expanding the limits of gratitude, and constantly renewing vision and habits are the pillars of solid, permanent, and irreversible prosperity. This was how Florence Scovel Shinn lived and taught it, and this is how any reader can experience it by making their prosperous consciousness their greatest treasure and legacy. Chapter 10. Money as Inner Teacher, Self-Esteem, Service, and the Perfect Expression of the Self. On the path to true prosperity, there comes a moment when money ceases to be merely an external resource and becomes a faithful mirror of the inner world. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that money is the most precise thermometer of self-esteem, a silent teacher that reveals, without judgment but without error, the level of self-worth each individual holds. Every fluctuation in financial flow is ultimately a direct reflection of the internal image the individual projects into the invisible field of universal abundance. The central principle is unavoidable. The relationship with money always mirrors the relationship one has with oneself. Those who doubt their own value will find that money hesitates to come close. Those who fear receiving will experience delays, losses, and difficulties. Those who associate prosperity with guilt will unknowingly sabotage every opportunity that comes their way. Florence argued with logic and detailed examples that no decree, ritual, or visualization can sustainably overcome the self-image each person holds as an unconscious truth. For this reason, deep financial healing begins with the transformation of self-esteem. The individual must learn to see themselves and treat themselves as a worthy channel of wealth, an unconditional recipient of all the blessings life can offer. Money then becomes an inner teacher, not a relentless judge but an impartial guide. Its presence or absence is not punishment or arbitrary reward, but the mechanical result of the prevailing vibration. Florence illustrated this principle with the story of Sarah, an artist who rejected prosperity for years, believing that sacrifice and scarcity were spiritual virtues. Only when she recognized the value of her talent and allowed herself to receive with gratitude and dignity did the flow of money multiply, opening doors and possibilities that had previously remained closed. Self-esteem is not arrogance, but the humble acknowledgement of the divine nature within each person, which demands recognition and manifestation. The next major discovery is the relationship between loving service and the flow of abundance. Florence observed that money seeks pure channels, free from resentment and selfish calculation. Wealth that remains and grows is that which circulates through genuine service, activities born of dedication, authenticity, and the desire to contribute to the well-being of others. The individual who dedicates their life to service, in whatever form, becomes a natural recipient of money, as it responds to energy of expansion, generosity, and usefulness. Florence explained it this way: money is God in action, seeking to bless the world through you. Who are you to deny divinity this expression? Money that flows freely and with purpose always answers the question, how can I serve best? Discovering the perfect expression of the self is the culmination of this process. According to Florence, there is no universally prosperous activity.
Each soul must find its own channel of manifestation. The perfect expression is that in which the individual experiences joy, dedication, and a sense of purpose. It is the occupation one could perform even without pay, yet paradoxically attracts the greatest abundance, precisely because of the authenticity and love with which it is performed. Florence guided her students to recall their golden childhood memories. What activities did you perform with pleasure before learning about utility, profit, or competition? Within those memories lies the seed of purpose and the key to aligning vocation with prosperity. The transition from victim to conscious collaborator is the natural result of this path. While the victim feels at the mercy of external forces, blaming money, the economy, or fate, the collaborator recognizes their inner power and takes responsibility for their vibration, beliefs, and decisions. Money ceases to be an enemy or problem and transforms into an ally willing to serve the greater good. Florence documented the story of Rosa, who, after a deep financial crisis, realized she needed to stop blaming circumstances and begin consciously dialoguing with money. The discipline of recognizing her value, serving others, and acting from the certainty of her dignity opened doors to new opportunities and